Teen Speak. Empowering today's youth. The purpose of Teen Speak is to allow teens a safe space to share stories and strategies around challenges and inspire other teens on how to meet their own challenges or make their mark in our world. Some of our guests may have done some inspiring things that may not resonate with everyone's views, be it personal or political. This is not a political podcast, and though we have our own personal views, our guests do not necessarily reflect our views. They are simply here to share a story and experience in hopes it inspires others to be the best version of themselves and make the impact they desire in the world.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Teen Speak, Empowering Today's Youth. I am Coach T here in North Carolina.
And this is Keith, Youth Empowerment Leadership Coach here in New York. And I apologize in advance. I'm having construction done in my house, and this is my home office. So if you hear a little buzzing in the background, they're drilling something. So I apologize for the noise. Hopefully it's not too loud.
Oh, well, we appreciate you giving us a heads up on that, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. And I'm going to give you the honors today, Keith, of introducing our guest for this episode.
Yeah. So Rodena's, I know her mom, who, when I started coaching, did a course. We did a course together on just, understanding how to really connect with your clientele and whatnot. And through that, we stayed connected on LinkedIn, and we constantly commenting each other's posts and getting to know each other. So I've actually known her mom for never met in person, but for almost 3 years. So she's in England, but one of the reasons we brought her on is one, because, I keep hearing from mom how great she is. She's like, my daughter would be perfect for your podcast. So we're glad she's on here, but also, I think there's a lot to talk about, right? I know you shared about just how you like to help other people. I think it's great how you came, right? I'm used to so many people from the States here, like my kids that go do something abroad, right? But I know that perspective, but I've actually never had somebody give it the perspective of coming here and doing school here from abroad, right? So coming from England coming to Florida from England to do a semester, right? Love to know a little bit about, how that felt. And also just the fact that, hey, it's hard to leave your home country, come to another country for a whole year, right? So why don't we start by just share that experience, what made you want to do it? How did it feel? And, what did you get out of it? And just to share with other teens, because again, there's going to be other people listening that might not be in college yet, might be considering doing something, going overseas for a semester, and what the experience is like, what you got from it, how it benefited you, and, why you'd recommend it to other teens to do it.
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I completed my sophomore year at the University of South Florida last year. I'm now in my final year of school at Oxford Brookes, as you can see in England. But so I guess I've always just had a passion, I suppose, and an interest in just getting out in the world, experiencing new places. My parents have both been in the military, so they've sort of lived and worked all around the world, and it was just sort of natural to me. I've been to a lot of places. I'm very lucky for that. When my school gave me the chance to study abroad, I could have gone anywhere in the world. There was I applied for Australia and a few other schools in America, in the States. But for me, it was just a no-brainer, to be honest. That was one of the reasons I applied for the school I'm at now, because I knew there was that chance in my sophomore year to go abroad. And as soon as my teacher sort of said, applications are opening, I was like, I'm definitely going to do this. As I said, it was just a given to me. And it was the best thing I've ever done. And I don't just say that now, because I'm on a podcast, I say it to everyone. It was the best 9 months of my life, and I would do literally anything to get it back again. It was you can't take anything away from there's so many things in the world to explore. There's so many places. And I just think we're lucky to have the opportunity, or if you are in that position and you have that chance, then I think you should just grab it, because it can be daunting. I know that. And I've been at boarding school in England since I was 8 years old, and I've worked in Thailand before. So that was a scary experience as well, being on my own or being with my parents in a completely new place. I have no idea where I was, to be honest, in the beginning. Initially it can be scary. And I remember getting my visa, and there was some issues with that. And then I was on the plane, and it still wasn't really sure if it was going to go ahead or not because of COVID, because it was sort of just when lockdown was sort of opening and the borders were opening. We wasn't really sure what was happening. And I sat on the plane. I was like, what am I doing? Oh my God, like, have I made the right decision? And then I arrived in Tampa, never been to Florida before. And then I went arrived at USF, and it was just crazy to me. Like, I could not believe it, because the college life, I suppose, is very different to school here. And the campus was huge. Like, I've never seen anything like it. But yeah, and it was amazing, because a lot of the friends I met there were also other exchange students who were just doing a semester or a year abroad. So we were all from different places. Like, I've got friends for life. I've been on holiday with them. I've been on vacation. The friends I've made there, some are from America. But funnily enough, most of my friends I made there were actually from Europe as well, because we just sort of, I suppose, we just sort of were attracted each other. But yeah, like, I just want to go back there, like, straight away. So yeah, definitely, I really want to experience that again. But yeah, my biggest advice would be, it is daunting and it does seem scary, and your initial instinct might be to just stay with what's comfortable with you, like at home, because, you know, where you are now, you've got your routine, you've got your like circle, you've got your family to look after, your friends, and you don't have that when you go abroad. But I promise you, like, when you experience these things, you'll realize it sounds like really corny, but it does kind of change you as a person. Like, I've become, I guess, stronger and more resilient doing these things, because you have to go through more tests to get there, and it can be difficult. But if you stay in your comfort zone where you are now, then you're kind of limiting yourself to challenge yourself in these ways. And yeah, like, my major out there was really different too. So that was hard at times, because when I came back here for my final year of school here, I felt, in the beginning of this year, I felt a bit like behind and a bit lost, because I obviously missed a year of being here. And I remember I walked into my first class this semester, and I was like, oh, this is really weird. No one knows me, like, because my first year of college was online on Zoom because of COVID, so I didn't really meet anyone. But yeah, I would do it all over again. Like, I would never change my chance to go away. And it was actually probably one of the only, or maybe one of the good things that happened out of COVID, was that I originally applied to be in Australia, but the borders closed and all that stuff. So I ended up being Florida, and I'm so glad I did, because I've got a family who live in New York, so I could go see them. And yeah, I've always loved hot climates. Like, sounds bad, but as soon as I finish college here, I just want to, like, move out of England and go to hot places and experience and just travel around and, you know, see as much of the world as I can. So yeah, it was just like a dream to me, to be honest. I had friends, my friends there, went to class, went on beach days, and it was just crazy to me, because there were some other students there from England as well, and we said to each other, we were like, oh my God, is this our life? Like, this is so weird. I used to have these moments where I was just like doing homework in my room, and I was like, wow, I'm in Florida, like, this is really cool. But yeah, it was amazing. And my advice would just be, just do it. Like, I know that's so much easier said than done, because it does seem scary, but you will not regret it, I think, anyway.
Listen, up here in New York, this is what we all do, right? Everybody, after a while, we're all like, okay, we're moving to Florida. Like, it's kind of, at least where I live, everybody on Long Island, as soon as they're ready to retire, everybody, they either go out west or they go to Florida or Atlanta. It's like, we're done with the cold. So I get you wanting to find the warm weather.
Yeah, I know Florida's known as the place where people move out and when they retire and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why.
It's pretty good there. Other than the summer. Summers are pretty brutal. What about also about, like you said, you worked in Thailand for a little bit? So
yeah.
Tell me about that. I was back there, my God, back in the early 90s.
Oh wow. Yeah, so my godmother lives in Thailand. She has done all my life. So when my godmother and her husband moved out there a long time ago, he was a geography teacher, and they basically created this resort hotel kind of for vacations in northern Thailand, in a little village called Tarton. It's in the middle of nowhere, to be honest. Very rural. But yeah, so they created a resort, and basically the idea was that they have volunteers or people who come out there, stay in the resort, and they help out with the local communities. So there's a few schools in the area, sort of like, I don't know, junior schools, I think you call it, for like little kids. Yeah, and then I always get confused with the names of school, university, college, but okay. But yeah, so they help out with schools around the area, and then my family, I got to get it right. They're basically, yes. So my godmother, someone in her family who's like our family friend, almost like family. They have a son who has Down syndrome, and he's called Thomas, and they created this educational learning center, I suppose, called Thomas House for Thai kids who go there who've got disabilities or special needs. So I spent a week working in one of the schools as like an English assistant, essentially teaching English to the kids. And then the next week I was in Thomas House with the kids who were disabled or had so many different special needs, and I looked after them and sort of just, you know, helped their days seem a bit brighter, I suppose. Yeah, so I did that in 2019, and yeah.
Great, no, that's great work. So I'll ask another question. I'll let Antoine jump in. So now that you shared, you know, like your experience overseas, you know, finishing up there now, what do you want to do? Like, what's next for you?
Oh, that's a scary question. So yeah, I finished my major in 2 months, or less than 2 months. And yeah, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's funny because I've sort of gone down the path of my mum, I suppose. So my mum's a resilience coach, as you mentioned. Like, I know you met her through coaching, and she's always been passionate about helping others overcome things they're going through, and not necessarily sort of therapy or counseling that's quite negative. Like, that can be sort of the approach of, oh, this happened in my life in the past that's making me feel like this today, blah blah blah. It's sort of like in a more positive way, like there's nothing wrong with you. It's just, how can you become the best version of yourself? And people will go to her, will go to life coaches and stuff, not that they're like feeling down or depressed or anything. It's just sort of like, I want to feel like I want to be even better than I am now, like the best version of myself, kind of thing. So that's what my mum does. And then my dad has also been a personal trainer for a while, helping clients like in the gym with injuries, or just, you know, they might go to be like, oh, this is my goal in 6 months, I want to be this and this. And I'm studying sport at school right now. My major in the States was exercise science, so sort of a combination of basically what both my parents do is kind of what I want to do after I finish school, which is kind of weird that I'm following their footsteps, I suppose, but I just sort of ended like that. But yeah, I originally wanted to study business at school, business studies, because I think I was sort of at a point when I was at high school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And the default thing is, oh, let's do business because it can sort of be used in everyday life. But then I realized that's probably not really getting the most out of my college experience, because, yeah, and then I realized I sort of enjoyed sport a lot, and my family, my parents have always been reactive. It's just sort of been natural to me. So yeah, my sort of next step, I suppose, would be sort of with clients, helping them physically and mentally, but sort of in like a more holistic way, not just like, oh, I want to lose weight in this amount of time, help me get a 6-pack kind of thing. Sort of like, how can we make this sustaining and long term for you to be the best version of yourself? Because we all struggle with self-doubt sometimes, and I'm really bad really bad critique of that. But yeah, I suppose life experiences that I've had made me realize, like, there's so many people out there that I could help, and that I want to just serve and do the best that I can to help people feel the best that they can, I suppose.
So I actually want to, Rodena, I want to go back to college for a minute. I have 2 questions, but I want to go back to college first. You mentioned South Florida is where you attended, right? Your sophomore year. What were the other schools in the States that you had applied to or were of interest to you?
So, gosh, that was quite a while ago now. I'm trying to think. Yeah, actually, originally, as I sort of mentioned, I wanted to go to Australia. I think because I thought, well, while I've got the opportunity to go and study somewhere so far away in a different place, that'd be amazing. But I didn't really think it through, to be honest. I think the fact I ended in Florida was like a blessing, because obviously I've got a family that's closer to home and that. But yeah, University of South Florida was my first option. I also applied for University of Texas at Austin, and oh my gosh, I forgot the other one. I know there was one. I think there was 3 in the States. I applied for one in Canada. I forgot what the last one was. That's really bad. The application was so long ago. I had to do everything so sort of far in advance. But yeah, it was funny because I never really considered Florida. I don't know why. I just sort of, in my mind, I was like, oh, I want to go to Australia. That's it. And then my sister was like, oh, what about the States? Like, our brother lives there. It's closer. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm so glad that I did now. But if I remember the last school I applied for, I will let you know, because that's going to bother me now if I don't remember.
Oh, it'll come to you before we finish, I bet. The other question was, you made a couple references to your parents and the work that they do in both serving in the military. So one of the things that stood out to me, and why I want to ask this question, we know you, myself, and Keith know the importance of family. Family is really important, and the influence that they have on you. And Keith had asked you, kind of what your plans were. And it really sounds like you're combining both of what your mom and your dad do. And I'd love for you to share the influence and the impact that they've had on you to kind of have you going in that direction, that you care a lot about what they do.
Yeah. Well, I suppose they have had an influence, obviously, because that's sort of, I've seen them do that, and it's sort of what I've been interested in. But at the same time, not like what I want to do with my life, I suppose. They've not encouraged me, discouraged me, put me in a direction at all. That was completely my choice. I completely sort of just came to me. I was like, oh, I want to help people do this, this, and this. I have a great relationship with my parents, and I'm very fortunate for that. They always have supported me no matter what. And I know they've never sort of put me down in a way. They've never been like, oh, do this, don't do this. They've sort of very much let me be my own person, and then, as I said, encourage me in whatever I do. But yeah, I suppose obviously they have had a lot of influences to some extent, because, as I've said, I've always been close to them, so I've always looked up to them and just sort of followed in their footsteps. I mean, I suppose when you're a kid, you sort of naturally follow what your parents do. Like it's funny because when we would go on vacation, we were known as like the fit family, because we were always very active. Like, I suppose you have to be very fit to be in the military as well. My parents have always been very much into their exercise. They've always been very sporty. And yeah, people ask me like, oh, you seem to stay fit a lot, like you in the gym, blah, blah, blah. But it's just always been that way. Like, I've never really questioned it. And I'm very lucky that I've sort of grown up in that, with that kind of role model, because obviously, staying fit is like really important for me, at least, and for everyone. Like, it helps us look after ourselves and feel great and all that stuff that we know about. So yeah, they have had an influence in that way, because if they weren't sort of like that, I wouldn't be like the way I am. But yeah, at the same time, whatever I want to do with my life has just sort of been exactly my choosing.
Ask you a question. So, like, just talking about resiliency, right? Like, knowing your mom's resiliency coach, right? Like,
yeah,
can you share like an experience you had where you needed to put that to action, and were able to use the strategies, and it's just being raised by somebody who just understands that, right? I'm sure she gave you those basic tenements, and your dad, right? So, like, give us an example of like a time where you really need to practice resiliency, and how it turned out and what you did and how it felt, and kind of just maybe take us through that experience.
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind, hence everything I've just said about how amazing my time was in the States, it was, and I don't want to take that away from anything. Like, that's the first thing I would say. I think one time that I had to be very resilient and just trust that the universe would do its thing and everything was going to work out, I suppose, was the process of getting there. Because, as I said, COVID, like, I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. There were so many problems I had with like visas and legal stuff like that, and my passport literally arrived at my house with my visa on whatever day it was, and then we booked my flight and I flew to Florida the next day, which sounds really dramatic. I'm saying it was like a really resilient moment. It sounds like really, really pathetic, but it was just, I knew how badly I wanted to do this. I knew, like, I really want to go and study in this place. And yeah, all these problems kept happening, like things kept falling through. We didn't know if I was going to make it, because I didn't know this, but I think it's like an American policy that basically if I didn't arrive on campus by a certain day, then I just couldn't go at all. I would have to continue my studies in England. And then I arrived like a few hours before that deadline because of all these problems I had. So it was really touch and go. Like, until I was sat on the plane, it wasn't until then I was like, okay, this is actually happening. So that was a moment for me. And I've learned a lot from my experience. At the time, it was horrible because I got myself in such a mess. I was like, oh my God, it's not going to happen. Like, I was having all these negative thoughts, like, oh, I'm just going to end up here for another year, which in real life, realistically, is not the end of the world. But yeah, I guess through things like that, my mum really helped me see things as like, she as the perspective of like, this is out of your control. Just let the universe do its thing. If this is meant to be, it will be. And if it's not meant to be, then maybe the visa arrives late and you end up being in England for another year. But that was for a reason, you know. And it sounds really corny, but I'm such a strong believer in everything happens for a reason. Another thing, like another time I have to be really resilient. I mean, 3 times, I suppose, was that experience. And then while I was in Thailand as well, and also COVID times, because when I finished high school, basically in England, we have these big exams, and it's kind of a stressful time of year. I'm sure probably a similar thing in America. At the end of high school, which determines like where you go for college, and it determines your grades for like future job applications, or, you know, it's like the big thing you have, status of your education, and that all got cancelled because of COVID. So it was so strange, because everyone in my year of school, we were all like, oh, what happens now? Like, how do I know when I'm going to go to college and all these things? And that was a stressful time because no one knew what was going on, and it was like the government and everything here was such a mess. Like, there was no communication, and we were all sort of like panicking because the teachers didn't know anything either, and we were all just like, oh, well, this is a really important time of our life. It's all been basically completely scrapped, and it's completely out of our control. And then, so what else was I going to say? Yeah, then also in Thailand, how I said going abroad is like an amazing thing that sorry, that's the doorbell. But also, yeah, it can be challenging, because that was a scary time as well. I was only there for 2 weeks, but that was really a time where I had to like look after myself and be like, come, Rodena, you can do this. Like, it's going to be good. Because I remember my godmother was supposed to be in the resort at the time I was there, but she had other things or something. She wasn't there. And it was in the monsoon season. So it was just hurricanes, kind of like Florida weather, to be honest. It's raining all the time. And because it was like their winter season, there weren't any guests in the hotel. So I remember I arrived in Thailand, never been there before. I can't speak any Thai. And I arrived in the airport, and then my suitcase got lost or something like that. And then yeah, I arrived there, and there was like this random person with my name on a sign coming to pick me up. And I was like, okay, well, I guess that's for me. And then it was the middle of the night, and it was like completely dark. And then I arrived at the resort, and yeah, it was just kind of a scary time, I suppose, because it was one of those times in my life where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, where am I? Because there was no communication either. Like, I couldn't speak to anyone at home. So yeah, I was like, oh, well, you know, I'm here for a reason. I may as well make the most of it. And that was a time I could have just been like, oh my God, I want to go home, like whatever. But yeah, I sort of kind of stuck to it, and I was like, oh, well, this is great. And at the time, it wasn't, in the beginning, it was kind of tough in the beginning, but then I'm so glad I did that, because my mum keeps saying, when I applied for college here, I wrote about that in my statement, because it's quite a unique thing to do. So I was like, oh, well, you know, this can make me stand out. And she was like, oh, I really believe that's the reason why you got into this college, because like, yeah, I suppose it was challenging at times, because I was in this middle of nowhere. Like, people were looking at me like I was weirdo, because they hadn't seen anyone English there at all from any other nationality, and I couldn't communicate with anyone. But yeah, I know in terms of like the big scheme of things in life, those experiences of like visas and being a different place and like COVID times is not too drastic. Like, when I say it out, it actually sounds kind of pathetic that I'm saying like, oh, it was a really scary time, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, I've still got many years of life to live. But so far, those are 3 things I would say that was kind of like challenging at the time, because those times really made me learn that now I approach situations of like, well, if this is out of my control, why am I wasting all my time and energy getting worked up about it when I can't do anything anyway? Because at that time I didn't know about all this stuff, and my mum helped me a lot, and I'm very grateful that I have someone like that who's got all this knowledge about this kind of thing. But yeah, I used to get myself in such a mess. I was like, oh my God, it's not going to work, blah, 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 all these things. But now I'm just like, oh, well, I'll let it be. What will happen, you know? So yeah, I suppose it wasn't like the end of the world, like, as I said, but I learned things from those experiences, and it all worked out well in the end.
I appreciate you sharing. You know, it's funny. I remember your mom posting something about
oh my gosh.
And she talked about the universe. She talked about how, like, you know, she shared how she was feeling, and like, you know, what happened with the visa and all that. And she was like, but I'm just going to trust the universe. Like, I remember her but just the fact that you even said the same thing about like the universe, like
I suppose, yeah.
no, but clearly like it rubbed off on you, right? Like her way of thinking, the strategies, and the way she handles resilience and like just acceptance around your current reality. I think it's wonderful that you picked that up from her, because that's going to serve you so well as you experience more in life, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too.
The only other thing I was going to add was you said something, people looking at you like you're weird. All you need to do is look to your left of your screen and you see two weird people right here. We're weird. You're good.
But oh no. But yeah, it was just such a crazy thing, because I remember I was staying in the resort and it was completely empty because it was the winter season. Like, obviously no one's going to go on vacation when it's just monsoons every day. That didn't really occur to me at the time, because it was just my summer vacation at school, and it was the only opportunity I really had to go anywhere for a while. But yeah, it was completely empty. And then I walked into like the little town, and when I say it was the middle of nowhere, I've never been somewhere so remote in my life. Like, it was actually crazy. When I was there, I was like, oh my God, I never knew. It sounds really bad now, but like, it just really opened up my eyes to like how many different places there are in the world to experience. Because I was like, when I came back home, I was like, this is crazy. Like, it's so different. But yeah, I was walking down the road just to like kill some time, because the school day in Thailand finishes at like 1 p.m. So that was crazy, because then I was like, oh, well, what do I do for the rest of the day? And then I got some very strange looks, because people had never seen a white person in that place before, because it was just so remote, and they were looking at me like, is that a tourist? But it was such a rewarding experience. I didn't say that earlier when I first started talking about it. And definitely the work I did with the kids really opened up my eyes, and it just sort of gives you a new sense of like gratitude, I suppose, because I came back and when I came back home, I was like, why do I get so worked up about and stressed about tiny little things in life? Like, I'm in such a fortunate position right now. Like, I've got a great relationship with my family. My parents are still around. I live at home. Like, I've got a great house to live in, and all these things that we sort of take for granted for, I think. And when I was in that place in Thailand, and there was about 10 people living in a little room together as their house, and these kids were like so strong, and like they were just so happy, and it just, makes you realize things. They didn't have much at all. Like, it was a very poor community, and they were just like smiling all the time, and it was just so nice to see. And yeah, it just sort of gives you moments like, oh, like, yeah, why do I get so worked up about things? Like, I'm in a great position right now. I should be grateful for where I am.
Yeah, I was going to ask you when you got home, kind of did it make you appreciate your life a little bit more and what you have when you experience things like that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because it's so important that sometimes we get overworked over the smallest things. And when in reality, other people would do anything to have what we have, but they're happy with the lives that they have, because that's what they've grown up with, and they've learned to appreciate what they have.
Yeah, and they don't know any different. And I suppose this just came to me. It's quite a big thing that happened in my life. I don't know why I didn't mention it before, but I guess another time that I had to be pretty resilient was when my mum was deployed to Afghanistan in the army, and I didn't know if I was ever going to see her again. But I was 10 years old when that happened. So at the time I was like, oh, okay, like, mummy's gone away. She'll be back soon. But now when I look back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was quite a big event. But yeah, as I said, like, my parents have always been in the military my whole life, so it was just sort of normal to me.
Yeah, something else that you like, what you were talking about with like what you saw in Thailand, like that just shows power of gratitude, right? Like, when we're grateful for what we have, because I always say this, like, truly, I really believe the key to happiness is gratitude. And when you're grateful for what you have, and just this is gonna sound like a funny example, but I'll share it because it'll make sense. Like, out here, at least where I live on the island, a lot of kids go to summer camp, right? And there's summer camps that cost like next to nothing, and there's summer camps that cost like literally college tuition. I mean, it's crazy, right? And I always say, like, it doesn't matter where they went, as long as they went and had fun. They're not going to know this place had a fancier pool, or this place had air-conditioned bunks, or this place had this, or this place. They don't know. What they know is they had an experience. They met amazing people. They bonded with people, and they had fun. That's what they know. And it's I know that's a bit of a extreme example, but I was just trying to make the point. Like, so even something as simple like that, like you're talking about people living in, rural poor communities, right? Who are running around happy and grateful for what they have. But it happens in communities too, where you can apply this anywhere, right? To communities where, there is people do have money, right? And they send their kids away and this and that, but those same kids, not everybody comes from the same place, right? Or parents aren't going to spend the same amount of money, but at the same time, if they're happy where they are, they're happy where they are. They don't know. So when you don't know any different and you could just appreciate what you have, all of a sudden it doesn't matter what everybody else has. And when you can do that, it's so much better. Like, even I'll share another example because these are funny, but they're true. Antoine knows this. I used to be in the catering business for many years, right? And when I was in the catering business, it was always, well, somebody had, is this what the parties are like? My kid's been to a million of these and they're going to expect the same thing. So they're looking to do something similar. Now, because of COVID, right? Nobody really did these big parties anymore. It didn't happen for a while. So people did these really simplified, and a lot of it's changed kind of part of that business a little bit, because not everybody's going crazy anymore, spending all this money, because they're like, these kids don't know any different. So like, obviously people still do, but it just, the point I'm trying to make is like how, like when you're conditioned to expect something, you're going to have a certain mindset around it. When you're just grateful for what you have and you don't expect other things, you're so much happier because there's nothing, you're not looking for anything. You're just enjoying and embracing what is in front of you. So I know it's a roundabout way to get to my point, but I hope I made a clear point there.
No, definitely. No, I agree. I think until I discovered like the power of gratitude, I mean, it wasn't until like recently, I suppose, until I was more sort of like inclined to understand what this stuff was. Yeah, it wasn't until like last few years that my mum sort of used to tell me about what she does and help me and all these stuff. But yeah, until I discovered like gratitude, it changed things so much, because as you said, it's like, it's actually funny. I was watching a podcast about this earlier, like just before I came in the podcast, where this girl was saying that when you're suffering from anxiety, you can't be in that state of all these intrusive thoughts when you're in a state of appreciation, because it's like, she was basically saying that when you're feeling anxious, or when you're overthinking, you've got all these crazy thoughts in your mind, like what if this, when you're worrying about things like in 10 days time or 2 months time or whatever. And I'm really guilty of that. Like, I'm such a worrier, which is something I'm really trying to work on. But yeah, she was saying that like when you become grateful for things, your mind like clears, and it's almost like you look at things with a wider view, and it's like, oh, okay, like life is not that bad. Like, I've got all these things going for me. So why do I stress about one single thing? And I remember, yeah, I've got like gratitude diaries that I've filled, and it's funny, I was looking back at them recently, and I was like, oh, like looking at that time of my life, I was like, yeah, it's true, because I remember when I was like struggling with my mental health and things didn't seem great, it's difficult to think of good things that are going for us. And that was the time when my mum introduced to me like gratitude journals and stuff. And in the beginning, I thought it was really stupid. I was like, oh, I've got nothing to be grateful for. Like, life is really bad, blah, 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 like feeling sorry for myself. And then when I just started to appreciate the small things, like, oh, there's a roof over my head, like I had a nice meal today, all these things. Yeah, it really changes your mindset a lot, as you said. I'm sorry, I'm just reiterating what you're saying right now. But yeah, definitely, I think it's such a powerful thing. And then, yeah, I always try and like tell people that, because I think I'm very fortunate that my mum is in the world that she kind of is, because I wouldn't know any of these things if it wasn't for her. Like, obviously, you know, if your friend's going through a breakup or they're stressed about college or whatever it may be, you're trying to be there and comfort them. But it's easy to just be like, oh, don't worry, like things will get better. But when you actually understand like the wider reason why you feel like that and how you can fix it, that's when it really changes. Like, so like sometimes I'll go to my mum and I just want her to feel like sorry for me because I'm like stressed about something, and then she'll tell me like what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And that's what I'm grateful for with her, because I wouldn't have that if she wasn't doing what she does, you know. So, but yeah, I agree with the whole gratitude thing. I really think it changes a lot.
Cool. Antoine, I know you have your little lightning round of questions. You want to hit her up?
Yeah. Well, before I get to that, I just want to I'm going to read something from your submission form, because you just basically what this whole conversation just encompasses what you wrote, and it said the question was, what do you want others to know about you? And you said, I've always been praised for being conscientious, empathetic towards others, resilient, and determined to never give up despite obstacles. And you gave so many great examples of that. And I just wanted to point that out because I think that that's the point that I think a lot of our listeners need to take away. And I'm speaking specifically of your peers and those that may be a little younger than you. You are definitely experienced a lot of things, but you've also learned to be appreciative of a lot of things. And I think that's a testament to your parents as well, and you understanding what your parents are trying to instill and share with you, and you've embraced that. And I think that that's tremendous. So I just wanted to mention that before we get to our lightning round of questions. Now, there's no right or wrong. All you do is just answer the questions and you'll be good.
Okay,
Are you ready?
I feel nervous. Okay, I'm ready. I'm in the hot
Are you
seat.
nervous? Okay.
No, I'm
All
good.
right.
I'm good.
Yeah, just take a deep breath. So the first question is, who is your biggest influence and why?
I would say my mum, I think. I mean, more recently, people that have come into my life have got a great influence on me, positive. But I say in terms of like longevity and how long that's lasted, my mum's always been a great influence on me. And why? I've just always looked up to her, I suppose. Like she's been through so many crazy life experiences just through life and like through the army and so many times. And she very much like, it's funny because she's so hard on herself, and I don't think she realizes all these things she's achieved. And when I say to her, like, oh, you've done this and this, and she's like, oh, yeah, like, oh, yeah, I have. But yeah, I look up to her, and I guess she's had a huge influence on me because, as I said, I'm very fortunate. I've always had a close relationship with my parents, and I sort of suppose I was thinking about this recently. I've only really realized this recently, but I suppose a reason for that maybe is because I'm an IVF baby, which is a kind of random thing just to say in a podcast, but I've always been grateful for that in the way that like I know how much my parents like have a this sounds so corny to say it loud, but yeah, I've known how much my parents have always loved me and cared for me and have always wanted me basically, and I've never had to doubt that because of what they had to go through for me to be here today essentially. And my mum has always had an influence on me because I guess she's always made such an effort for us to be close together and for us and for me to like grow up in the way that she wants me to, not in a forceful way, but just sort of like, you know, you have a way of like, you know, you want your child to be like happy and this and this and this. But yeah, because I've got that strong relationship with her, I've always gone to her for advice. She's always been there for me. And I would say she knows me better than anyone, like, you know, whatever it is. And we're very alike, sometimes too alike, sometimes. Yeah, because we're so alike, she really understands me, and she always knows what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And I think that's a great asset as well. When people are like, oh, don't worry, like you know, just sleep on it. Sometimes in that moment, you need someone to have a bit of like tough love on you in a way, because she knows what I can achieve, and she knows my strengths and all that stuff. So yeah, she's always influenced me in that way because she's always wanted the best for me. Yeah, I suppose I would say with my mum in terms of like how long I've been alive for.
Well, we've been a lot longer than you, but we won't go there. All right, so our next question is, what is your biggest strength and how would you utilize it as a superpower?
Sorry, did you say my biggest strength?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I would say a lot of people say, it's funny because I always find this interesting when you get asked about yourself, because it's easy to say how good someone else and how amazing they are, but when you ask to like praise yourself, it's like awkward. Like I feel weird right now. I don't know. I suppose my biggest strength, I don't know if it's my biggest one, but I know that I'm very empathetic towards others, and I have quite a like nurturing, I don't know what the word is, but I've always been appraised for like, I've suppose been like a good person to be around. And I guess things like, for example, when a friend's going through a breakup, it's easy to be like, oh, you deserve better, don't worry, like plenty more fish in the sea, all that stuff. But I sort of, that example, I look at it as like, I will tell someone kind of like, I don't know how to explain. Yeah, you put me on the spot, but yeah, I suppose I'm very like empathetic and caring towards others people said. And yeah, resilient for one thing, I guess.
Yeah, so I gave you the answer to that one in my summary right before the questions, and that's what I knew it would be. And you make a valid point though, because I'm similar like you. When people ask me about those kind of things, what your strength is, I'm not used to talking about myself, but it shows the true nature of who you are at the same time. So it makes you that much more unique and special. So just remember that.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
all right. So our next question. Woohoo. What do you find is the biggest challenge for teens in today's society, and how do you manage yourself around it?
I was gonna say, oh, there's a lot. I can't pick one, but that doesn't sound great. The biggest challenge, I would say, just the pressures of that age. Like, as I said, I always used to want to be a teenager. When I was younger, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, that's really trendy. Like, oh, being like 14, that's really cool. 16, whatever it is. And then when you get to that time, I was like, oh my God, like, I don't want to be a teenager again. But I guess, especially, I don't want to sound all corny and like say what everyone else says about like social media, but I suppose that is a big challenge as well at the moment. And just the pressures of like, I feel like that time of your life there's so many expectations, like especially one thing is that like, oh, you're expected to know exactly what you want to do with your life and when. It's like, oh, what do you want to do after school, what do you want to do in your career, blah blah blah. And like, it's okay not to know. I still don't know. My mum only found out what she wants to do a few years ago, and she's, I don't want to say her age because she'll get annoyed.
Yeah, you get in
um,
trouble there.
yeah, no, but yeah, there's just so many expectations, and I would say to my teen self, I mean, I'm literally 21. It's not like I'm looking back in years and years. I would say like just stay in your lane and just, it sounds so much easier than done, but just like block out what other people say and what other people, like everyone has such an opinion about everything all the time. And it can get so overwhelming. Like, you always have to do this right. And like people at school would talk about how you dress and how you look and like, oh, you always got to get good grades. And I was struggling at school. Like I went to a really academic school and it was like a great school, one, you know, but where I excel is in like I suppose like what I just said, like being empathetic and like and caring and like hardworking and determined. Like school was not great for me. Like I was not really academic and good at exams and all that stuff. So then I realized like, yeah, a challenge is sort of not fitting in, because you don't always, you know, it's not a question of like, oh, you've got to fit in with the right crowd. It's like, you just got to be yourself. And I know that's so much easier for me to say now and so much easier said than done, because like you always, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the time as a teenager, you sort of like change things or like you quit things because you're scared of being judged. Like there's so many things I regret giving up because I was like, oh, that's not cool, or like, oh, I don't have time for that. But like if it's something you want to do, like when you think about it, in a few years' time, is it really going to matter what people thought? Or like in a few years' time, are you going to be like, oh yeah, like I've really made a good decision to stop doing that because like this boy in my class was like picking on me? But like most of the time, especially in a teenager, so many people are not sure about themselves, and everyone is struggling. Everyone is like I don't want to say insecure, but everyone is like, it's such a weird time of your life because it's almost like there's this big pressure to like plan your life, I suppose, but like everyone shows off that they're doing amazing and that they're like working really hard and they're like getting good grades in all their classes, but it's not true. Like everyone's struggling with something at the end of the day, not in like a horrible way, but it's just, I feel like a lot of people put on a persona that like they're really strong and they want to be the popular kid, but in reality, it's not really like that.
No, you know, I want to share. First of all, empathy to me, that is a superpower, because a lot of people do not possess that. It's really, you know, true empathy is really hard for certain people. So I think that's absolutely a superpower.
Yeah.
The other thing, I just want to make an observation, what you said, because it's so true. You know, you were talking about like fitting in and right, like think about right the energy, the energy we have to exert to be somebody that we're not, right? And then what happens? Like eventually we grow up, right, and we mature a little bit, and then all of a sudden we realize these people, like you start to be yourself, and now those very people that you like are now entrenched with, they're no longer your people, or they don't connect with you anymore because they're like, you're not who you really are. When if you just who you are, you know, like hey, like if you just own who you are, you're going to end up with the people that are like you. But those are the people that you'll always have. They'll always be with you. And I think a lot of times as a team, right, we struggle with that, the pressure of like fitting in. But the truth is, like, it's so much more work to fit in than it is just to be ourselves. And if you can teach that lesson, right, get that when you're younger, is so much more powerful, right?
I agree. You said that so well, but yeah, like there's always such an expectation of you want to be with the cool girls or you want to be with like the boys that are really popular, but like it's exhausting. Just be yourself, as you said, because when you are yourself, you'll attract people who are like you. And if you're pretending the whole time, it's not going to be like authentic, is it? And then and you'll realize, this sounds really negative, I don't want to say it in like a bad way at all, but you'll realize, well, as you grow up and you sort of experience new things and you go to different places, you move out of home and all these things, you realize like who your true friends, I suppose, and people are. Like, I remember when I was at high school, I was like, oh my God, these are my best friends for life and we're going to be friends for years and years and years. But realistically, there's only very, very small amount of people I still keep in contact that are like really good friends that I'll have for a long time. But and I think you do realize that when you leave school and when everyone splits off, you sort of see like who was, not like you judge people like, oh, you were fake, you were this, blah, blah, blah. But I think at school it is so exhausting to always like fit in, and you want to be this, you want to be that person, you don't want to do this sport because that's not cool. But it's like, I think the regret that people have as a teenager is like just not being themselves, because it's so easy to get influenced by other people to be a certain person. But then in a few years' time, no one's going to remember. Like, no one's going to care.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
But when you're a teenager and you're through that, everything matters, right? Like you're now at 21, but like when you're a teenager, the littlest things matter, right? And when you talk about pressure, right? Like, who's putting that pressure on you?
Yourself.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's easier for me to say than say it. That if someone said this to me when I was that age, I'd be like, no, but that's not good, blah, blah, blah. I would just like ignore them. But it's true, because when you're a teenager, it's so much easier said than done. You always want to be popular, you always want to look like this, you want to be liked and blah, blah, blah. Obviously, you don't want to be sitting in a canteen on your own. But if that's what it takes to like just be authentic and be yourself and attract the people who are like that, then so be it. Like, I'm not saying no one wants to not have any friends at school, obviously. But I just think, there's so many things difficult about being a teenager. There's lots of challenges, but I think one big one is the pressure of just, especially at the moment, and like, because I suppose when you get older, not like even like in my age, when you sort of come out of that phase, you sort of realize that like a lot of people, their life is not like that. Like, you see on social media all the time, people looking like this way and going on fancy holidays, but like that's not reality. And I feel like when you're a teenager, you're sort of learning all these things, and you just sort of take everything as they come. And you're like, oh my God, look, she's got like an A star or whatever in her grades. And then, but a lot of people are just pretending because they want to look like the best. Like all the time, people will be like, I haven't prepared for this exam, but then they get a really good grade. But realistically, they're just trying to look cool because they're like, oh, whatever, like I can smash it anyway.
So what you're about to get, I want to switch the tables a little bit. So you're the host of this podcast, and now you're providing a platform for more mature people like Keith and myself. So I want to be more like Keith. I want to be like him. So should I just do everything that he does so I can be as popular as he is, or should I just kind of plant my own seed and go gradually and grow gradually, or do I just emulate and copy everything that Keith does so I can be like him? Because he's my idol. He really is my idol, by the way.
Well, I would say, if that was like someone was feeling that, I would ask them, or they would ask themselves like, but what is it about that person I want to be like? Or you would say, do I actually want to be like them because of these reasons? Like, I admire them, they've got a good work ethic. Like I've got friends in my life that I want to be like to a certain extent, like they have a good routine or whatever it is. And if that's the reason, like that's fine and that's good, because then you can have people you look up to, and I'm sure there's things about you that they admire and they want to employ as well in their own life. But if it's like you saying you want to be like someone, or you admire someone because they're the popular kid at school, they're like the best in the sports team and all these things, and like you're trying to obtain this like this person of you that's not natural and it's just not you. And that's when I think it becomes like, why you do that? Like, who are you trying to prove to, you know? Because at the time it's like everyone wants to be cool, everyone wants to be popular. Like, oh, you know, we all know there's like a group of boys that are like, or group of girls at school that are like really cool. And at the time it's like, oh, I want to be friends with them because that makes me look cool. But like, what for? You know? And that's something I learned a lot, because I joined my school like a bit late, not late, but that was a lot, like a few years late, because my school runs from like age 2 to age 18, whatever, and I joined sort of in the middle. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, everyone's already friends with each other. Like, this is really hard. And then I found friends. And I remember people used to look at me because I used to be friends with some people that were not seen as like cool. But I just didn't care, because I was like, why does it matter to you? Like, why do you care who I'm friends with? Like, because, and then I realized those people are often quite insecure about themselves. And the way they feel secure and liked by people is by seeing to be popular or sporty or good looking or whatever it is. And I was just like, well, this is me. I don't care if you judge me, because I'm just being myself. And in a few years' time, is it really going to matter? Like, I'm probably not going to see you after I leave school anyway.
You just nailed it.
That sounds really bad.
No, you did. You're gonna be a therapist. You're gonna be a great therapist, by the way. You're gonna help. No, you're natural for this. No, you really are. Yeah. So one last question for you. What is your biggest failure, and what was the lesson that you learned from it?
Oh my gosh. What was my biggest? Oh my god, I don't think. Like, do you mean things like something tangible, like or
Anything, just something maybe that you struggled with, that you like, you didn't do, you failed at it, and you know, maybe you figured out how to succeed at it the next time around, or just something, or how you just dealt with it, right? How you dealt with failure or letdown.
I suppose, I don't know if it's so much failure. I suppose when I had battles and when I was struggling with my mental health, I didn't, like, if I was, how do I say this? I wouldn't let myself be in that same position and mental state now, because I know what I can do to prevent it. And I know it's not necessary. Like, I would get myself in such a hole and have all these intrusive thoughts. And then it became like a state of depression. And I was like really bad for a while. And then I was like, oh, well, this is my life. Like, I'm just going to stay like this. Like, there's no point. And then I don't know if that's sort of fair. That kind of sounds negative, but I know so many people are struggling with things all of the time, and we don't know what someone's going through. But I think I was saying to myself, like, oh, Rodena, like, that kind of was unnecessary. Like, you're stronger than that. You don't need to be so hard on yourself and put yourself through such negative emotions when you know you can handle it better than that. So I suppose if I, there's things all the time. Like, as I said, I finished school in 2 months, and every day I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing after this? Like, it's a scary time. But when I have those moments, like literally today, I was like kind of freaking out about all these things I've got to do and deadlines and blah, blah, blah. And then I was just sort of saying to myself, I was like, well, you've been through things before and you know how to handle it. And it's like, the more negative thoughts you have, the worse it's going to get. I know that's so much easier said than done, which is something I'm still working on. But it's like, as soon as you have something in your head, that little voice in your head, you've got to take a step back almost and just be like, this is a situation. Like, I'm stronger than this. And then what's the worst that can happen? I always use that phrase, and it can kind of sound negative, but I sort of use it as like, oh, well, if this is the worst case scenario, that's not too bad. And like, that's going to be fine. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I guess like a failure as such would be when I've let myself get in such negative and bad states. It was unnecessary just because I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know what was happening. I was like, oh, I'm just feeling really sad, like, for a really long time. Like, oh, and you just sort of accept, like, oh, well, everyone feels sorry for me. Like, this is that. And I just completely ignored my mum, because my mum knew all about this stuff. And she was always telling me, like, oh, it's a choice. You don't have to feel like this, blah, blah, blah. And I would be like, and I would just get annoyed at her and just be like, oh, let me just be sad and like depressed for no reason. But I realized that's like really unnecessary. And it sounds really negative talking about this, because I'm much better placed now, and I've learned so much from those experiences. And I don't regret being in that place, as in, like, it's not nice. I'm sure we've all had experience like that. But it's like, I've learned so much from that, and now I'm a lot stronger and resilient. And I still struggle with it a lot. Like, every day I can overthink a lot and worry about things, but not as much as I did then, because I know how to control it. And I know myself more now, and I know techniques to sort of get over it. And the book I'm reading at the moment is really helpful for that as well, because it sort of puts life into perspective. There's just sort of tools I use to help me sort of like snap out of these mindsets. Like if I was like that a few years ago, my instinct would just be to like have a breakdown and cry and be like, oh my God, this is life. It's really bad. Everyone feels sorry for me. Like, whatever, I'm doomed. But now I'm sort of like, no, that's not going to help. Like, Rodena, you could do this kind of thing. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but that's just something that sort of came to mind, I suppose.
You did answer it, and you also just even brought up another. You actually drove home another point about like personal responsibility and not playing the victim, right? About
yeah, that's a good way to put it. I always lose my words when I'm trying to explain something.
No, it's great. That's what you basically said. Like, I chose not to be a victim anymore, right? Like, I'm gonna take control of my life. I can't control what happens. I can only control how I respond to it. And that's what. And you know what? Being authentic and taking personal responsibility, like, that takes courage. So
yeah, I think when you first experience these feelings, or like, I remember the first time I was going for like a, I don't know, bad phase, I like to call it. I don't know what was happening, because I was like, oh, I just feel really like sad today, but like, why? Everything's fine in my life. Like, why do I feel like this? And then when I first experienced anxiety, it's scary, because I was like, what's happening? Like, and then when you sort of like start to learn about it and understand what's going on, that's when you can sort of change it. And I think that's something that's difficult, or like something that I hope will help people understand, because it's not like there's nothing wrong with you, because it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I feel like this, what's wrong with me, like blah blah blah. In your head you have all these, like, this little voice in your head, you just want to shut it off. And like, there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong at all. It's just like a habit of changing your thinking of like, okay, well, this is how I'll handle the situation, and just take things day by day. Because I'm guilty of like stressing about things in a few months' time or weeks' time, or like, oh, what am I going to do after college, blah blah blah. But I've just got to trust that like things have worked out before, so there's no reason why they shouldn't work out again, kind of thing.
Yeah. So one last question, because we gave you about 50 minutes to come up with the answer. What was the third school that you applied to in the States?
Oh my God.
You thought I forgot? You don't remember.
I actually still don't remember. There might actually have only been two. That was definitely USF. And then there was University of Texas at Austin. One in Canada. I know, obviously, that's not in the States. And then my gut is telling me there was a third one in the States. I could be wrong. Oh my God. I'll let you know if I find out, but that's going to really annoy me otherwise. I'm going to have to go look at my application on my emails from like 4 years ago now.
I'll just ask your mom. She'll know.
Yeah.
Where did you go in Canada? Like McGill or one of those?
Sorry?
Where in Canada did you apply?
Calgary.
In Calgary.
I actually have never heard of it before the application, but I was like, oh, okay, put that in the box. But that was like another example, I suppose, of like, I don't know, I've always had the approach of like, oh, well, what am I going to lose? I'll see what happens. Like all these, like USF, I never thought of going to Florida. I never even heard of the place in Canada, but I was like, oh well, it's a life experience. I'm not going to regret it. So
Canada, it's beautiful over there.
But that's really going to annoy me if I can't find out the name of the other place.
Well, when you find it out, you email us and let us know what it is, because we both want to know.
There might have only actually been two. Maybe I'm just telling myself that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's no surprise that you have the mindset that you do, knowing your mom, and I think it's great. I think you shared some really great, like, just strategies, and even if you didn't realize you were doing it, but like you made so many good points about so many ways of being to be healthy, in your mindset, and so I appreciate you for being on here, and thank you for willing to do this.
Takes practice. It's not like instinctive. I remember when I was going through all these things a few years ago, and my mum would like tell me with stuff, and I was like, oh, but why can't I just feel better now? Like right now? Like, why do I feel sad all the time? But yeah, you just have to be kind to yourself as well. Like I've learned that like I've always been really hard on myself for no reason. Like there's no point putting yourself down. Like that's not going to achieve anything. You just got to like be kind to yourself and just take things step by step. But yeah, things like that, I suppose, as I said, like you just got to be patient as well. Like it's a learning process, and the more older and mature you get, the more you'll realize like how you'll understand and learn about yourself more. And that sounds silly, but like I understand like when I have this thought, I know that I could go down one path that will just like get obsessive and like more negative and like it will spin out of control, or I could go down the other path and just like take a step back and be like, oh, you know, Rodena, you know, this is your life. Like you can get through this, and it's just one little blip, and you've done it before. And I always use the phrase of like, you've got through this before, so you could do it again. I used to write that in my gratitude diary a lot, but yeah, I'll stop talking now.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Hey, this is your platform, and the more you share, the more people are going to learn from you. So there's no time limit on this. I think the thing that stood out to me the most, Rodena, is your compassion and the empathy you talked about, and the experience in Thailand really stood out to me, and it's a testament to understanding who you are, where you're coming from, and how people appreciate what they have, and to be thankful for what you have, and not to measure yourself to other people or what other people have or what they don't have. So I think your point about traveling and going to different places, like going to Florida and being able to go to Thailand and experience those things, or things you said it several times, things that you won't regret. And I think that that's important too, is for people to take opportunities so that they don't regret things and not be sitting in their head going, I wish I had when I had the opportunity. So I think that's a testament to that as well. So we appreciate you coming on and sharing wealth of knowledge. And to Keith's point, you shared more than you think you did, without question.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed, and I hope that can sort of help at least one person. But yeah, I think you sort of learn these things as you grow up, and I've still got a lot of life ahead of me, I hope. So yeah, it's just sort of life experiences, and sort of
we're learning every day. Listen, even us old guys, we're always learning. Right? It's never enough. There's always more to learn, right? From every experience we have, we can always be better.
Definitely. And yeah, I suppose that's something my mum's always ingrained in me. That's like, she has this phrase all the time, and sometimes it really annoys me, but she's right. And whenever anything bad or negative, or even just like, I don't know, the Wi-Fi crashes and she's got a meeting or a coaching call, she'll be like, it's all a learning opportunity. That's always what she says. And I think it's true. And sometimes I'm like, oh, why can't you just say that something's bad for once? Like, she always has a positive spin on everything. And I think that's really something great that everyone should sort of inherit, I suppose, because it sort of makes you look at things like, oh, like this is not that bad. But yeah, she always says like every challenge is a learning opportunity. She says that a lot, and I think that's true.
But I think the other part, Rodena, is that you may not realize this, but Keith and I will be making reference at some point about this interview with you, because with what we both do with working with young people is we're always striving to be better at what we do. And what better way to get better at what you do by having conversations with those very kids, and that's that very age group that we work with. So you provided us tools to do a better job of what we do. So we thank you for sharing that with us as well.
Well, I'm glad I could be of service.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before Keith sends us off, I wanted to just kind of mention, if you are a parent of a teen, or if you are a teen yourself listening to this episode and would like to be a guest, we would love to have you. And of course, Rodena is going to share this with her friends so that they'll come on, because we'd love to have some more of your friends come on, so they'll tell us more about you that you didn't tell us about you, that you never know.
I'll say I'm a horrible person and I'm a really
I doubt that. We doubt that. But if you would like to be a guest, you can go to Keith's website, which is shiftyourpower.com, and fill out the form there. Or you can go to my website, CoachTsCorner.com, and fill out the form. We'd love to hear from you. Love to have you as a guest. Rodena, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on, and you're a phenomenal young lady, and your mom and dad should be very proud of you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed having this conversation.
Can't wait for your mom to hear this. And always remember, like, the only limitations you have are the ones you put on yourself.
And just be you, because everybody else is already taken.
Another one. Very true.
Until next episode, take care.
See you soon.
Are you looking for an experienced youth empowerment and leadership coach to help your teenager find their true north? Look no further. Let Coach Keith and Coach T show you how, through education, support, and inspiration. Visit their websites, shiftyourpower.com and coachtscorner.com, respectively, to learn more about the services they offer and to book a session today.